Member for Gwaja.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, my question is to the Attorney-General. Attorney-General, why did you not consult with the domestic violence and legal sector before announcing new domestic violence laws? Have you done any work to ensure these changes align with the national plan to end violence against women and children, which the Northern Territory is signed up to? Have you considered, does this align with the Northern Territory Aboriginal Justice Agreement or the 35 recommendations from the coronial into the domestic violent deaths of 4 Territory women?
Attorney-General.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you for this very important question, because we have seen an increase in domestic violence across the Northern Territory of 82% over the last 8 years under a Labor government. They failed to take action to keep people safe, Madam Speaker, and this government, who was only elected less than 8 months ago, has taken action immediately, because we want the Territory to be a safe place, and we will absolutely take the steps needed to ensure that women and men, in some cases, are safer from domestic violence than they have been over the last 8 years. We have done so much work in this space already. I have met with the Women's Legal Services a number of times. The Top End Women's Legal Service, Madam Speaker, I've met with 3 times in the last 8 months. The Central Australian Women's Legal Services, I have met with 3 times in the last 8 months. I've also met with the CAFLU, the Central Australian Aboriginal Family Violence Organisation in Alice Springs. And so there has been consultation. We had a number of conversations about a number of factors to do with trying to keep women safe and providing those legal services to women, especially women who are victims of domestic violence. One of the key things I spoke very, very specifically with Top End Women's Legal Services was the Victims Register, something that I introduced in this parliament this morning, which will be expanded, something, Member for Gwaja, that was part of the recommendations of the coronial that you mentioned in your question. So we're looking to expand all of that. There's legislation going to be debated in the next sitting of Parliament, which means that more victims will be notified about more times when their offender is on the move. Most importantly, Madam Speaker, is we want to protect Territorians.
Order, Madam Speaker.
Take a seat, Minister. What's your point of order, Member for Gwaja?
Standing Order 110, relevance. The question is directly to the Attorney-General. The sector is saying they haven't been consulted. Why didn't you consult the sector before introducing these legislative changes?
Member for Gwaja, the Minister is answering the question. Please continue.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I was saying that the most important part of the legislation we've introduced today is that people who breach their DVOs will receive a mandatory sentence, Madam Speaker. And that is so important because victims need to be kept safe. Some of the deaths that we've seen in the Northern Territory is because the perpetrator has been out on bail, out in the community, out to revisit their victim time and time again. Those people need to be dealt with. There needs to be consequences for the perpetrators of domestic violence, and that is why I brought forward that.
Take your seat. Leader of the Opposition, what's your point of order?
110 relevance, Madam Speaker. It's specifically about the consultation process for the Attorney-General.
The Minister has talked about the consultation that she's done. That's what I heard her say, but please continue. Minister.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Labor just don't want to listen, and this is why the Territory was in such a state, and which is why they were voted out last election. I've said it this morning, I said it this afternoon, about the meetings that I've had with the Women's Legal Services, which are so important. We need them to be having service delivery to our women, most vulnerable people in the Northern Territory. Madam Speaker, the other part of the legislation is the Victims Levy, which is going to increase to 41% for victim services.
Minister. Member for Wanguri, what is your question?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My question is to the Chief Minister. Chief Minister, last night Labor showed their true contempt for Territorians with the federal budget and failed to understand the importance of the Territory in this nation's future. Chief Minister, with 3 of the 4 federal members being Labor, how can Territorians send a message to Canberra that we won't sit down and take their insulting maintenance money?
Chief Minister, stop the interjections. Member for Guadja, please.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Fantastic question, Member for Wanguri, and I know your constituents are absolutely disgusted at the lack of respect that the federal government has shown the Territory overnight. With just $200 million in new money coming into the Territory for a little bit of road between Darwin and Katherine, which, by the way, is contingent on Territory taxpayers having to fork out $40 million to meet that money. And if we don't stump up, they don't stump up at all. So it's absolute smoke and mirrors from a Labor government that has fundamentally missed the strength and the importance and the point of the Northern Territory to this nation, Madam Speaker. It is short-sighted and it is downright offensive. What the federal government doesn't understand is this, Madam Speaker. We have a strategic defence advantage with our position in the Indo-Pacific, our proximity to Asia, the vast array of minerals and rare earths the Northern Territory has to indeed build renewable futures, to provide defence manufacturing opportunities. We have enough onshore gas to power the nation for hundreds of years, Madam Speaker, something that the East Coast desperately needs, the agricultural opportunities which will provide jobs on country and feed this country in the off-season to everywhere else, and our iconic tourism opportunities embracing our stunning, vast, wild, beautiful landscapes and the depth of our cultural heritage and significance, Madam Speaker. And Labor yesterday showed Territorians that they fundamentally do not understand how important the Northern Territory is to this country, to this nation and to every other Australian who should be looking to us for answers and solutions to the problems that this country has. And instead, Madam Speaker, the federal government's priorities were more on delivering pandas for Adelaide Zoo than they were on delivering for better economic and social outcomes for Territorians. They came more about pandas. And the member for Solomon, Luke Gosling, has been crowing on about the port and delivered absolutely nothing, Madam Speaker, showing he has no influence. He is irrelevant, as are the 3 out of the 4 federal members we sent to Canberra, Madam Speaker. 3 out of 4 of them are Labor members, and what did they deliver last night? Pandas to Adelaide Zoo.
Silence.
That's what they have done. Where is our broader reform, our zone tax offset? Where is our increase in migration numbers, our increase in international student numbers?
Silence.
Where is our tailored infrastructure plans so that we can deliver on the minerals, the rare earths, the gas? Where's our investment in Middle Arm? Where's our investment in the Beetaloo? Madam Speaker, the reality is this. Labor turned their back on Territorians last night, and this federal election is Territorians' opportunity to turn their back on them.
Opposition Leader, what is your question?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My question is to the Minister for the Prevention of Domestic Violence. Minister, if your government is serious about addressing domestic, family and sexual violence in the Northern Territory, why do you keep ignoring the recommendations of the NT Coroner's recent report into the deaths of 4 Territory women? Why won't your CLP government commit to implementing those 35 recommendations that will actually make a difference across the Territory when it comes to the horrific rates of domestic violence in our community? And Minister, can you please update the House on the recommendations that you have implemented as outlined by the Acting Minister yesterday in question time?
Minister for Prevention of Domestic Violence.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I must confess I am continually bemused at the lack of understanding of how these processes are meant to work. We have such a focus on why aren't you consulting from those on the other side, when in actual fact what we are doing is making sure we consult with all of those people who are impacted in this space to make sure that we get it right, because we know that over the last 8 years, with an increase in domestic violence assaults of 82% across the Northern Territory, we have not seen a system that was getting it right. So we have, and I have repeatedly said, Madam Speaker, we have rolled out immediately the recommendations around intervening early with our youth and making sure that we create pathways where we change behaviour, and expanding the co-responder model and embedding it into our system, which were 2 of the recommendations from the coronial. The rest of the recommendations have taken careful consideration, extensive consultation with our service providers, extensive consultation with our departmental people, really looking at what are we doing that works, what are we doing that doesn't work, and making sure that as we respond to those recommendations, which those on the other side should be ashamed because the fact that those recommendations had to be made at all when they were recommendations that almost mirrored the recommendations of the previous coroner, Greg Kavanagh, back in 2017, for which they took zero action. They should be ashamed, Madam Speaker. We take this matter very, very seriously. And it is for that reason that we have started working with our young people, and in doing so through the Circuit Breaker program are working with their families. We have had referrals already through that program to family support, to education, to housing, to prevention of domestic violence services, to emergency and crisis accommodation, all through the interventions that we have taken by working with those young people who are so severely impacted by the horrendous impact of domestic violence.
What's your point of order, Leader of the Opposition?
Order 110, asking about what recommendations have been implemented as outlined in question time yesterday.
Opposition Leader, the Minister is directly answering your question from what I'm hearing. Please, you've got the call, Minister, and please, Opposition Leader, be quiet and listen.
For the benefit of those on the other side, Madam Speaker, because clearly they haven't read through the recommendations, otherwise they would already know which ones that I'm referring to, and which I have repeatedly stated in Parliament, they would be Recommendation 7 and Recommendation 15. The balance of those recommendations have received serious consultation. There has been extensive consultation across all the departments, and I personally have gone out and spoken to a range of services across the Northern Territory, talked to service providers, talked to legal service support workers, talked to those who are providing crisis accommodation, so that we know that when we put these programs in place going forward, we will get it right.
Time has expired, Minister. Member for Karama, what is your question?
Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Mining and Energy. Minister, last night the Albanese Labor government released the budget for 2025-2026. Only a week ago, our CLP government released our NT Economic Strategy 2025 to guide the rebuilding of the Territory economy over the next 3 years. The 5 priorities of our economic strategy are to make the Territory the best place to do business, build a bigger and better workforce, deliver for Australia, unlock regional growth and connect the Territory. These priorities, Minister, hinge on playing to our strengths and natural advantage in areas such as energy. Minister, could you please inform the Assembly as to the impact of the federal budget on our government's economic priorities?
Minister for Mining and Energy.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank the member for Karama for the question, because I know how important he thinks that the economic strategy is of the Northern Territory based on his previous history, and he knows how important to have a strong economy in the Northern Territory. So, Madam Speaker, to answer the question very quickly, they had nil impact on our priorities because they forgot about us. The federal government forgot about the Territory. And as the Chief Minister just pointed out, they spent $3.8 million on pandas in Adelaide, and they forgot about the Territory. The federal budget fell well short of what we needed to support our economic strategies and our key priorities. That's why this government's got to go it alone. Our core priority to deliver for Australia focuses on energy and resource production through nation-building projects like Middle Arm and the Beetaloo Basin. Our economic strategy aligns with the federal government's policy, and our Deliver for Australia policy reflects the Commonwealth's focus on manufacturing and energy security, and yet they forgot about us. We expect the government to honour its $1 billion commitment to Middle Arm and support low-emission technology and manufacturing, but that funding hasn't been delivered yet. For those focused on renewables, it's important to remember that major projects such as Sun Cable and the TEH2 project may not proceed and could be affected if Middle Arm doesn't go ahead. Madam Speaker, our ability to fast-track energy production from the Beetaloo Basin, central to our key economic strategy, is being held back through lack of federal support. The 2025 gas statement of opportunity shows that the East Coast will face gas shortages by the 27 or 28, in a few years in front of us, Madam Speaker. The Beetaloo, Australia's largest onshore gas resource, could help fill that gap. Our commitment to deliver for Australia includes providing Australia with reliable and affordable gas that the big states like Queensland, New South Wales and Victoria desperately need. It is the Territory and Territorians who benefit from the role that we play in delivering this energy. Again, we need to build our economy to help Territorians, help locals. We expected infrastructure investment to back the Beetaloo, such as runways in Daly Waters, in Tennant Creek, the Catherine River Bridge upgrade, and to support pipeline infrastructure to deliver affordable gas to Darwin for Territorian and, of course, to the East Coast on a second tier. The East Coast urgently needs cheap, reliable gas to avoid major blackouts, and the federal government should be investing in the Beetaloo, not building ports to import gas from overseas that deprives Territorians of jobs, royalties and opportunities. We need to make sure that our gas is cheaper here to make sure that the Territorians benefit from gas onshore. Thank you.
Member for Arafura.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My question is to the Minister for the Prevention of Domestic Violence. The domestic violence and sexual violence sector are yet to see a single extra dollar from your government. Minister, once and for all, be straight with the sector. Is the $36 million a year you keep referring to genuinely new funding, or is it existing money repackaged? And most importantly, when exactly will this funding start flowing to the frontline services that are urgently needed?
Minister for Prevention of Domestic Violence, and she will be heard in silence.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I guess in the first instance I'm a little baffled because I would have thought that those on the other side would understand how budget processes work and that much of the work that has to be done involves consultation with the sector to see what's possible, what's not possible, and that budget process for the 24-25 year was actually put in place and completed by those on the other side. But then when I look at the significant deficit that we have, perhaps it's not so baffling. But, Madam Speaker, I think the critical issue is there were two services that were quite critical that fell off the radar and fell off the funding track in March of this year. They were the co-responder model in Alice Springs and certainly the extra support for our young people, and that money was invested to the end of the current financial year. And those services have not only continued, but they have been expanded to the Darwin, Palmerston region and the Catherine region. And on top of that, we have put together an extensive program for the $36 million that we have committed in ongoing, unprecedented ongoing funding to the domestic sexual family violence sector until we see some real results in this space. And the funding will be announced, and where that money is going will be announced in our upcoming budget, but we have also already made the commitment that those services that are critical frontline services who were due to fall off the funding cliff on June 2025 will be secured for the future for the next 12 months as we continue to work with them to develop those programs that we know have an impact, that we know will deliver results, that we know will not just see more of the same horrendous outcomes in our community through the impact of domestic family and sexual violence. I am so excited to see what's coming out of that space. I wish I could discuss it in more detail now, but that would not be appropriate. But the feedback and the support that we've received and the information and the innovation that has been put forward in this space is truly, truly encouraging, because we will not continue to do more of the same, because more of the same will only deliver us more of the same horrendous results, and that is an escalation of the victims in this terrible space. So we will see over the course of the next couple of months very clear information, very clear projections around what to expect in that space. That $36 million is new money. We made the commitment that the previous government refused to make. We are going to deliver those services. We are going to see positive results, and we are going to see a safer community.
Member for Fanny Bay.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Infrastructure and Logistics. Last night, Federal Labor proved that Luke Gosling has absolutely no influence and cannot deliver for Territorians. His bluff and buster about Darwin Port returning to Australian ownership has been nothing but hot air. Last night was the last chance for the Albanese government to buy the Darwin Port back, and they failed. Minister, please outline the impact on Territorians from the uncertainty Labor has created about the Darwin Port.
Minister for Logistics and Infrastructure.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank the member for Fanny Bay for this very important question. And we know that the Albanese Labor government has failed once again to provide that certainty around the port. And as the member for Fanny Bay stated, Luke Gosling again has also failed Territorians. And Labor's cut Luke adrift, and Territorians are paying the price, Madam Speaker. The self-appointed salesman Luke Gosling is running open homes, it seems, without consulting his leadership team, or more likely, he doesn't have any influence, Madam Speaker. Seems he's about as successful in port acquisitions as he is in attracting Aldi to the Northern Territory. Maybe, Madam Speaker, it's time he resigns from commercial real estate, though his secondary position as member for Solomon doesn't seem to be going that well either. He's clearly just another number in the Labor Party room, lacking credibility to his own team in Canberra, and it is our community that is suffering for this. He stirred serious uncertainty at the port for workers, local businesses and major exporters who rely heavily on our port. Because, Madam Speaker, it's clear the Labor leadership team has left him out of their conversations. Despite all his commentary on the port over the past few months, what did we see in the budget, Madam Speaker? Well, that's pretty clear. We didn't see a thing. Nothing, nada, zip. But for his South Australian colleagues in Whyalla, billions of dollars within just a few days. Just last week and earlier in the month, Luke Gosling was on Sky News saying there'll be more to say about the port. Well, what did he have to say about the port? I'm meeting with them to have further discussions about their interest in selling the port this week. Well, Madam Speaker, I'm told from the people at the port they hadn't even been there in 7 years. It was his first visit. And he was going to get a bit real about where the price point would be, and hopefully that's a fruitful discussion because we can all have a win-win here, Madam Speaker. They can get a return on their investment, return the port to Australian hands, probably a mix of federal government funds and institutional investors, but Australian, and we can put the investment into the port that we need. Well, Madam Speaker, last night was the opportunity for Luke Gosling's colleagues in the federal government to stump up and commit to that promise, and they did not. And the Leader of the Opposition in the Northern Territory is quick to grandstand about the decision to lease the port, but where is her voice on the future of this asset now? All the Leader of the Opposition can focus on is what happened 10 years ago, not what matters now. Government is about doing what is needed right now, but the Leader of the Opposition's voice is nowhere to be found. Even the member for Quadra has come out forcefully and put his views about what should happen on the record, but crickets from the Leader of the Opposition, Madam Speaker.
Member for Daly.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Health. Minister, the Royal Darwin Hospital Maternity Services are preparing to support an extra 300 women and their babies due to the intermittent closure of Healthscope's private maternity services. This is a significant increase in demand in our public maternity services. The Federal Labor Government has made it very clear that they stand ready to provide additional funding support to help with the increase in demand, but apparently you haven't contacted them to take up that offer. Minister, when will you ask the Federal Government for assistance so that women of the Territory can be assured of quality maternity health care when they are having their babies? Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Minister for Health.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you to the member for Daly for asking this question. Madam Speaker, I'm pleased to say that the Royal Darwin Hospital is preparing for the closure of Healthscope on the 6th of June 2025. At this stage, it means that there will be 45 out of the 114 expectant families that will be affected by the closure coming on the 6th of June. Prior to that, the closure was the 17th of April, and that has now been extended. But the reality is, Madam Speaker, that the department has been working very carefully through this particular issue, and I must say that the work going on in the department has been absolutely incredible. And I do want to thank the department for all the work that they've been doing with Healthscope to address this devastating news for families here, particularly in Darwin, but there are other families outside of Darwin that had preparations in place for birthing at the private hospital here. It has been working well, and I do quote on the 25th of February, this is what Mark Butler said, Madam Speaker. He said that the Northern Territory Government under Minister Steve Edgington has been doing a terrific job. So there you go. It seems that the federal minister, the federal minister has been praising the work being done not only by my office, Madam Speaker, but the department working with insurers to pick up the slack that Healthscope is going to leave behind. But, Madam Speaker, yes, the federal government did offer, I think, $6 million, I think, to the Tasmanian Health Service, and offered to work with our department to ensure that there was additional money. What I can confirm is that there has been plenty of negotiations going on between the Department of Health and the federal department to...
Take your seat, Minister. What's your
I thought I
point
was
of order?
answering that.
I think he's getting there.
Thank you.
I don't like the answer.
Thank you. I do note there's 43 seconds left on the clock. The point of order was 110, relevance. The question was around, has the Minister, Minister Edgington, spoken to the federal government? I appreciate the department have, but I'd like to know if the Minister has.
A personal contact, Minister.
So, as I said, look, the federal minister has already praised the work that I'm doing. He's already praised the work that the department is doing, and that just highlights the work that has been going on through the Department of Health. Those negotiations will continue. They are continuing at the moment. But what I can say is that there's nothing in the federal budget to back up what we've been asking for. Not one single line in the budget increases maternity services here in the Northern Territory. So shame on the federal government. What we want to see is some better negotiations and start handing over the money to support our services.
Member for Goyder, silence.
Madam Speaker, my question is for the Minister for Housing, Local Government and Community Development. Minister, last night the federal budget was a chance for the Albanese Labor government to provide for all Territorian residents, including those in remote and regional parts of the Territory. Last night was a maintenance money budget that maintained the status quo, which only rehashed previous announcements and seemed to contain no new money for people and communities in remote and regional parts of the Territory. Minister, can you update the House on the Labor's budget that turned its back on the bush and our remote communities?
Minister for Housing, Local Government and Community
Thank
Development.
you, Madam Speaker.
Opposition members, please be quiet. Thank you, Minister. And you too, members of Goyder.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I think obviously the opposition are quite concerned when I get up to talk about the bush, because they know, if you look across the chamber, Madam Speaker, 4 members of that Labor government have all come from bush electorates. And looking at what's in the federal budget, Madam Speaker, there is absolutely nothing in there for the bush. And I've heard absolute crickets from the 4 members over there who are living, working, representing people in the bush, Madam Speaker, that haven't said boo about the lack of investment in the bush through this federal budget. That's how bad it is, Madam Speaker. They've just accepted the norm. They've got other Labor members in the government, the Senator Melanderi McCarthy, the member for Lingiari, Marion Scrimger, and they've also got Luke Gosling there as well. But one would have expected that we would hear more from the opposition, but we simply haven't. All we know is that out of the $760 billion federal budget, we've got a conditional $200 million for a road between Darwin and Katherine. That's the extent of the new money Madam Speaker, coming out of the federal budget last night. The Federal Labor said the upgrades to the Stuart Highway will be transformational for both residents and visitors of Darwin and Katherine. But what about the rest of the Territory? What about the bush? As I said, we've heard absolutely nothing from the members over that side who are living, working, representing people in the bush. They seem to think it's okay that there's no additional money in the budget for remote. Yet over the just last night, we were talking about health services, the importance of health services, housing, community safety, no additional money there to advance those services. So absolutely disgraceful that we've heard absolute crickets from the Labor people here. Madam Speaker, when it comes to the bush, we need federal representatives who fight for the Territory, representatives that are heard, not dismissed. We need representatives who are all about action, delivering certainty and security for Territorians. Madam Speaker, our economic strategy is focused on the Territory being the best place to do business, building a bigger, better workforce, delivering for Australia, unlocking regional growth and connecting the Territory. But when we look at the federal budget, there's absolutely nothing there that's going to support the economic strategy that we've put together. The federal government is simply out there. They're not listening to what's going on here in the Territory. So when it comes to the bush, there's plenty that can be done in the bush, Madam Speaker, and it's all about roads, it's all about health, police, education. The roads in the Barkly are absolutely in appalling condition. The Barkly Highway, the Tablelands, the Sandover Highway, all of those unsealed roads need major investment, but the federal government and the Labor Party have failed.
Member for Nightcliff, what is your question?
Madam Speaker, my question is for the Attorney-General. Attorney, we've just heard you speak about all of your supposed consultation with Women's Legal Services about your new law proposals. I would like to direct you to a joint media release yesterday from Quills, Top End Women's Legal and Central Australian Women's Legal. They said, and they expressed, quote, serious concern over the lack of consultation with specialist domestic family and sexual violence. They say we cannot support legislative changes made without meaningful consultation with those who work on the front line every day to protect women and children in the Territory. We've got a quote here from the CEO of Top End's Women Legal Services, who you mentioned. Women are dying. More must be done to end violence, but this cannot be achieved without working with the organisations and experts who provide critical support. Attorney, what is your definition of consultation? And how can you say you're making laws for DV victims when the actual people who are doing the work say that you're not consulting with them and they don't support your legislation?
Attorney General.
That is a great question, Madam Speaker, and I am so happy to be standing here today to answer all of these questions about the state of domestic violence here in the Northern Territory, which we know has increased by 82% over the last 8 years under a Labor government who used to say all of this bluff and wind and nothing, but actually never took any action to protect the victims. We have had so many deaths, Madam Speaker, so many, under a Labor government over the last 8 years. We heard the minister talk about a coronial that was done a number of years ago by a former coroner where none of the recommendations were taken up. Shameful, absolutely shameful. We've had another coronial which we're working towards to get actions taken out of it. And I'm going to stand here right now, like I did this morning, like I did just before in question time, and tell you we are bringing forward legislation taking action to keep women safe, to put the perpetrators behind bars. That is exactly what we are doing. We are increasing the victims' levy by 41%, Madam Speaker. What that means is that there is more money in the bucket to pay for victims' services. We have not seen an increase in the victim levy for a very long time. Labor certainly did not increase it, and we need more money because you know what, Madam Speaker? The federal government doesn't care. They didn't give the Northern Territory any extra money for domestic violence services, for domestic violence legal services for our women. We do care about people who are victims of domestic violence. We absolutely care, which is why I brought forward this legislation. We're going to make sure that if a perpetrator breaches their DVO and there's harm caused, they will go to jail. We are going to make sure that when something changes in the offender's life, like they get out of prison or they cut their ankle bracelet off, that the victim knows where they are. because under Labor, they didn't fix that system.
Take your seat, please, Minister. What's your point of order, member for Nightcliff?
110 relevance. I didn't ask about Labor. I specifically asked what is your definition of consultation, seeing as the orgs you've named have said you have not consulted with them, and how can you say you're making laws for DV victims if you will not meet with these organisations and consult properly?
So
they say that...
Minister, the question was about consultation, but you will be heard in silence.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And like I've said a number of times today, is I have met with the Women's Legal Services a number of times. The top-end Women's Legal Services 3 times. The Central Australian Women's Legal Services 3 times. There was a whole group of women's services and community legal services that came together in this very building that met with me for, I think it was about 2 hours, Madam Speaker, and they told me a lot of information about what they are looking for, the things that they were failed by under the previous Labor government. Madam Speaker, we also sent that legislation to the Scrutiny Committee. The Scrutiny Committee, which will
Take your seat,
ensure...
please, Minister. If it's about relevance, I think you can sit down, because she is talking now about consultation. What's your point of order?
But part 3, if the minister can't answer the question, can she redirect it to the minister who can, like her colleague Minister Cowell, who can actually answer a question?
Minister, you've got the call.
The Scrutiny Committee, Madam Speaker, I was talking about. Remember Labor scrapped the Scrutiny Committee after the last 4 years, saying, no, nothing to see here. We're just going to ram down legislation down your throat. Not us. We are taking action. We are being transparent. We sent that legislation to the Scrutiny Committee so that everybody in the Territory, every single body in the Territory can have their say about legislation. There is plenty of time for that to happen because we've actually got a pretty big break in between this sittings and the May sittings. So everyone will have their chance. Put forward whatever you wanted to say, put submissions forward, go and present in the public hearings.
Supplementary, member for Nightcliff.
Are you saying that these 3 orgs who put out this joint statement are lying when they say that you have not consulted properly with them? Because that's what they're saying.
Minister.
I don't know what else to say to you, member for Nightcliff, through the chair, Madam Speaker. I've talked a number of times about the number of times I've met with all of these organisations. There is so much more to be done with the Scrutiny Committee that's going to be happening for the next 2 months before the next sittings. I don't know, I can't speak on behalf of the people that are saying these things about our accountability. We are bringing forward legislation based on the what the Territorians have voted for us to do. They want us to keep people safe. We want to keep women safe. We want to keep victims of domestic violence safe. And if that means the perpetrator is behind bars, guess who's safe? The victim. The victim is safe when the perpetrator is behind bars. That is the most important part.
Take your seat, Minister. What's your point of order? Member for Gwadja.
110 relevance. Are you suggesting that the very people you named here having met with are lying around the lack of consultation?
Look, the minister is answering a very peculiar question, I have to say. But anyway, it's your call.
Speaker, no.
Member for Drysdale.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My question is to the Treasurer. Treasurer, this morning you provided a ministerial report on the federal budget. A federal budget that delivered $0 for Palmerston, $0 for Katherine, $0 to Alice Springs, $0 for the people who live along the Stuart Highway. In your speech this morning, you highlighted a $200 million federal contribution for the duplication of the Stuart Highway between Darwin and Katherine. Regional roads such as the Stuart Highway are critical for the movement of resources, cattle, goods and exports, and our military equipment and personnel, an area of increasing focus. Safe regional roads are also critical for the Territory residents who travel to work and leisure. Treasurer, can you please outline to the House the terrible deal the Territory got from the federal budget handed down last night, as I have a few ideas for where Prime Minister Anthony Albanese can stick those bamboo sticks, and if he digs deep enough, Madam Speaker, he might prod his brain and remember there's a Northern Territory.
Yes, I said that. Your time's expired, member for Drysdale. Treasurer.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The member for Drysdale did actually ask me a question, and I'd like to answer that question, Madam Speaker.
What's your point of order?
My standing order, Madam Speaker, is 109, the manner and form of questions. I believe the member for Drysdale is out of order in the last component of his question, and I ask that he can re-ask it because there were insults and imputations there about the Prime Minister of Australia.
What you said was disorderly. It was about the Prime Minister. So can you withdraw that, please?
I withdraw, Madam Speaker.
No, look, let's just calm down and let the Treasurer answer the question that was asked.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank the member for Drysdale for the question. And Madam Speaker, last night I watched Federal Labor's budget get handed down. And Madam Speaker, this federal budget is more than a slap in the face. They may as well have effectively thrown the budget book at us. The main takeaway, Madam Speaker, from the budget night was a lacklustre commitment to the Territory of only $200 million for the duplication of the Stuart Highway between Darwin and Katherine. And that's conditional on the Northern Territory putting up $40 million to make that project go ahead. And let's not forget, Madam Speaker, that the Tiger-Brennan overpass cost $200 million alone. So what are we going to get with $200 million for duplication of the highway between Darwin and Katherine? Mate, we'd be lucky to make it past Palmerston. Queensland, Madam Speaker, on the other hand, received $7.2 billion in new funding for the Bruce Highway. And Madam Speaker, just last year the Territory's budget was just over $11 billion. That's right, our entire budget for the Northern Territory, which covers our infrastructure program, our health and education services, and the work we do to protecting the community and improving public safety, isn't even double what Queensland received last night for a single highway. $200 million out of hundreds of billions of funding commitments is just chump change to the federal government. It's maintenance money, Madam Speaker, not the serious investment that we need. Madam Speaker, we may only have a population of 255,000, but we punch well above our weight. We may only make up 1% of the national population, but we grow over half Australia's mangoes. We are home to the MacArthur River Mine, which is one of the world's largest zinc, lead, silver mines, and are the front line of defence for our allies in the Asia-Pacific region. I'll say again, we are not on the front line, Madam Speaker, we are the front line. I think the federal Labor government needs a reminder that Territorians do a lot for this country. We contribute a lot to our economy, and we deserve a lot more than a couple of $100 million for the Stuart Highway that we got given last night. Madam Speaker, by not investing in the Northern Territory, the federal Labor government is also letting down the nation. The Northern Territory has everything the nation needs, and yet all the feds could cough up is a road. What about support for infrastructure in the Beetaloo Basin, which has enough gas to keep the lights on in the country for up to 400 years? What about the funding, not just equity, for Middle Arm and our infrastructure hubs, which will be the gold mine for this country's economic development, Madam Speaker? It's obvious that the federal Labor government sees the Territory as a frontier town with nothing to offer. All they see is a backwater that wants for nothing more than the Stuart Highway duplication. This is a dog deal that the Albanese Labor government gave the Territory in the worst federal budget handed down in recent history.
Expired, Minister. Honourable members, I advise of the presence in the gallery of participants from the OCPE Foundations of Public Sector Governance program. On behalf of honourable members, I extend a warm welcome. Member for Mulca, what is your question?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The question to the Attorney General. The media just reported reporting a 15-year-old girl was held in the watch house cell by herself for 3 nights and 3 days over a weekend after being arrested by the police. This is not an appropriate response to the child. For why has funding not been provided to ensure that the bail hearing can be assisted? Young people when they are detained over a weekend, this is a child and someone that should be taken care of, not by themselves, left alone in an adult house where is the government's duty of care?
Attorney General.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you to the member for Mulca for that question. And I did hear that same story in the media, which is quite sad, really, that we have youths who are committing crimes who need to spend some nights in the watch house. But what the most sad thing about that is, member for Mulca through Madam Speaker, is that we have children out on the streets committing crime. We have young people out on the streets breaking the law. And of course, if they're breaking the law, the police are going to catch up with them, Madam Speaker. They need to be dealt with. We have seen an unprecedented crime crisis over the last 8 years left to the new government by the Labor Party. And it is absolutely shameful. And there were so many youth offences that I don't think anyone could keep up with all of the youths that were out on our streets causing a lot of problems. So my message to Territorians who are young and out on the streets that do not want to spend a night or 2 nights in a police watch house is to not go out at night and break the law. They should absolutely stay at home and be safe. We don't want our youths out and about in the middle of the night.
Order, member for Guadja.
Breaking the law and then getting arrested by police. We don't want that. We want to address the root causes, which is what we've been talking about right throughout our election campaign. In fact, for 4 years in opposition, we were talking about addressing what we need to do to fix the crime, to reduce crime, and our youth do actually play a big part of that. It's a conversation we absolutely have to have. There are youths out on our streets every single night breaking the law, which means that they will be picked up by police and they will spend a night in the watch house. And that is not okay, because it is not okay that they're out in the streets in the first place. The work that we've already done since coming into government is starting to make a difference. We have the Minister for Children and Families now bringing forward the circuit breaker, Madam Speaker, which intervenes into young people's lives and their families to ensure that they can lead a life which is meaningful, fulfilling. They go to school, they have the right services they need, and they can have a life that is meaningful with good jobs. So, Madam Speaker, that's fantastic work that's happening. The other thing that we did when we first came to government, we actually moved Territory Families, which we now call Children Families, out of the correction,
Minister,
out of
take
youth
your
justice.
seat. Member for Johnston, what is your point of order?
1110 relevance. The member for Mulca asks, where is your duty of care to these young people? Thank you.
Minister.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Member for Guadja, you're on a warning. You are on a warning, member for Guadja. Continue, Minister. In silence.
Madam Speaker, I was saying that we moved youth justice out of Territory Families and put it into corrections because we needed to ensure that we could address the youth crime problem. The other thing is that over the last 8 years, Labor did not invest in our corrections or invest in our justice system, putting the system at breaking point. So we had police out arresting people and then our prisons full, our watch houses full. And it was an absolute nightmare, Madam Speaker. We're putting actions in place to turn that around. Our corrections master plan is well on track.
Time has expired. Member for Fong Lim, what is your question?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Local Government. Minister, since being elected as the member for Fong Lim, I've been regularly contacted by residents of the North Crest community about the provision of services and the lump sum payment of their rates. Now, Minister, as I've repeatedly noted in this House, I'm very committed to helping Berrimah North Crest residents, Berrimah North Crest actualise its potential as a suburban haven for young families. And frustratingly, North Crest faces significant service deficits, including an absence of postal service, supermarkets, schools and permanent council affiliation. Minister, can you advise the House of what this government will do to help address these challenges?
Minister for Housing, Local Government and Community Development.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank the member for Fong Lim for his question. Member for Fong Lim, I know how passionate you are and committed to represent all of the 12 different areas in your large electorate here in Darwin, and I thank you for the work that you're doing. I also know you are extremely invested and engaged with residents at North Crest, and you've been a strong and genuine advocate for resolution in relation to a permanent council affiliation. Member for Fong Lim, I want to congratulate you on the work that you've done to advocate for young families living in Northcrest and school children by securing a multiple bus routes to schools in the northern suburbs for residents in Northcrest. Madam Speaker, Northcrest is a very important development for the Territory, and it's important to recognise that the developer, DECO, for its investment and commitment to increasing our housing supply. Northcrest will provide living options for up to 2,000 homes, Madam Speaker. In the future, it will be home to thousands of people and have a full range of services and amenities to service a vibrant community. As Northcrest develops further, more residents and prospective business will look to put down roots and the demand for certainty will increase. Certainly under our $50,000 first homeowner grant, Madam Speaker, we're expecting further growth in that area. We are a government that creates certainty, Madam Speaker. For over 6 years, Northcrest has been in limbo under Labor, sitting as an unincorporated area with no local council representation, council-maintained community infrastructure or council administration or bylaws. Member for Fong Lim, I know you've engaged with residents at Northcrest. You have widely consulted, door-knocked extensively and are strongly presenting the message your constituents have given. And I thank you for bringing those concerns to me. This includes a strong preference for where residents would prefer their council alignment to be. That is, Madam Speaker, that residents of Northcrest have a strong view as where they see a natural council alignment and that they are wanting resolution and certainty that a final decision on council alignment will bring. Member for Fong Lim, I want to assure you and the residents of Northcrest that after 6 years of Labor indecision, which has been totally unacceptable, what I want to do is commit to this issue. It is a priority for our government and I expect to resolve this matter this year. After 6 years of inaction in Northcrest, and we can blame the member for Gwaja, he was the Minister for Local Government for a substantial amount of time and failed to deliver on Northcrest. Member for Fong Lim, we're keen to work together with you and resolve the issues once and for all.
Member for Johnston, what is your question?
You, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, my question is a question for the Chief Minister. Chief Minister, last week when I asked you for information on the Operation Beaufort report, you said you'd be able to get me more information. Specifically, what I would like to know is what disciplinary action did the department take against these police officers that openly committed a crime of lying to the court? Given the ICAC investigation was clearly flawed, was it referred to the DPP for investigation, given that it was clear that they had committed a crime? Thank you.
Chief Minister.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and I thank the member for Johnston for her question. Yes, you did ask me about that. Thank you very much, member for Johnston. And so, separate to that ICAC report, obviously the ICAC report was done and we've talked a lot about ICAC over the last 3 or 4 weeks, and as members of this House are well and truly aware, if the ICAC finds an issue that they think has any illegality involved, they then refer it to the DPP. That is the appropriate process. So if the ICAC has not found that, there's really no reason for anyone else to believe that the ICAC has missed that. So I'm not aware of any referrals to the DPP. That's certainly not something that I would be involved in as Police Minister. It is absolutely within the remit and the scope and the practice of the ICAC to do that if they believe it necessary. So I'll leave that as a matter for them. And then from the policing side, I can confirm that there has been an internal review being done in relation to Operation Beaufort and the members that you have mentioned. And again, that's an operational matter, and so that sits within police to deal with. But as you're aware, the ICAC went through the matter. There's really not much more I can add to it, Madam Speaker. But what I do know is our police are out there every single day making us proud. They do an incredibly difficult job. And from time to time, matters like this come up and it's disappointing. But on the whole, I'm very conscious of making sure that we're not condemning all of our police or trying to paint some sort of broad brush that isn't deserving on the men and women who pull on that blue uniform every single day and leave their families to go and protect ours. That is not lost on me for a minute, not a second, as Police Minister, Madam Speaker. And I have the deepest, most profound respect for our police force. We've already seen some really amazing crime stat results coming forward, Madam Speaker, after last week's crime stats announcements. Territory-wide house break-ins are down 57% when you compare January this year to January last year. Commercial break-ins territory-wide down 36%. You know, these things don't happen by magic. They happen because our police are out there, absolutely, putting all of their heart and soul and energy. You know, often, Madam Speaker...
Take your seat, please. Minister, what's your point of order? Member for Johnston.
110 relevance. I thank the Chief Minister for partially answering the question. My question was, what action is the government taken against these police officers who've committed a crime?
Chief Minister.
Did you just allege they'd committed a crime? Because you might want to walk that back. Stand up and say it.
Allegedly committed a crime.
Chief Minister, you can't instruct the...
Oh, I'm sorry, but she's alleging police committed a crime. She might want to correct that for the record, Madam Speaker, or I'll hold her to account for it.
Take your seat. Member for Johnston, did you want to correct what you said rather than being
I'm happy to say
so?
police officers who allegedly committed a crime. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Chief Minister.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and such is the disregard other members have for our police, Madam Speaker. If you think someone's allegedly done something wrong, why don't you walk over to the DPP and let them know, Member for Johnston? But as far as I'm concerned, this matter is closed. It's being dealt with as an operational matter. And again, I will stand here and fight and defend every single day our police because they're out there making the territory safe, something Labor failed to do for 8 years.
Member for Casuarina.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Parks and Wildlife. Casuarina Coastal Reserve is a treasured nature asset valued by residents, Territorians and visitors. As someone who regularly visits the reserve and engages with my constituents, I share the deep passion for its preservation. Recently, I had the privilege of joining a birdwatching tour where I witnessed some of the 269 beautiful bird species that call the reserve home. The Friends of Casuarina Coastal Reserve have expressed strong interest in being actively consulted as a key stakeholders in future decisions affecting the reserve. Can the Minister outline how the government is working with them and other community stakeholders to ensure the protection and the enhancement of this significant nature area?
Minister for Parks and Wildlife.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you to the member for Casuarina for his question. I know that he loves the Casuarina Coastal Reserve and so he has spent plenty of time down there, as he has mentioned. Member for Casuarina, your passion for that area, which you live so close to, is also shared by many other Territorians. And our government is committed to ensuring its long-term preservation. The Casuarina Coastal Reserve is well loved and a coastline attracting over 1.4 million visitors annually. How's that for the Territory lifestyle, Madam Speaker? Even though most people don't swim due to our jellyfish and our crocodiles, it is a popular spot for families to play in the sand, walk their dogs and trek through the monsoon forests. It is home to diverse ecosystem and critical sea turtle nesting sites, as well as the prolific bird life, as the member has experienced firsthand and talked about today. The reserve's biodiversity, historic World War II sites, Madam Speaker, and popular recreational activities like mountain biking, walking trails and bird watching make for a vital part of our beautiful and unique Territory lifestyle and our tourism economy, Madam Speaker. And the sunsets are breathtaking. Managing this balance between recreational and conservation is essential, and that's why the CLP government is committed to ensuring that stakeholder consultation is at the heart of any future management decisions of the reserve. And we want to ensure the right protections are in place so that the Casuarina Coastal Reserve remains a thriving, sustainable space for future generations and, most importantly, for Territorians to enjoy our beautiful and unique outdoor lifestyle. As part of the process, I did meet with the Friends of Casuarina Coastal Reserve on the 17th of February, where we discussed a range of important issues. They highlighted to me their ongoing challenges, such as arson in the reserve, invasive weeds from residential areas, and the need for additional resources. And all this feedback is valued, Madam Speaker, as we continue to engage with the Territorians about one of these most precious natural assets. So, Member for Casuarina, I hear that you're going to the Bio Blitz, which is the Casuarina Coastal Reserve event on the 29th of March this weekend. This community-driven, nature-based event funded under the NT Community Grants Program will bring together scientists, Darwin Park rangers and the local community for biodiversity surveys and educational activities. And it's a great example about how science and community can work together and support such conservation efforts. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Member for Arafura.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Health. Minister, the previous government's 2024 budget committed $20 million for a new primary health centre and morgue in my electorate of Gunbalanya, with the design already completed and construction tender scheduled to release in the first quarter of this year. Yesterday, you said that the project is well progressed. Unfortunately, this is not what people are on the ground telling me. Could you please update the chamber on the current status of this important project? Explain the reasons for any delays and confirm whether your government will honour the original timeline and full funding commitment.
Minister for Health.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This question might be best answered by the Treasurer, the Minister for Infrastructure.
Minister for Infrastructure and Logistics.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank the Minister for Health for passing it over, and I might be able to clear up something. Now, if memory serves me correctly, I don't particularly remember the Gunbalanya Health Clinic being in schedule for the first quarter for being commenced, because I looked at the infrastructure papers, and as I've said in this House previously, a $5.2 billion program with $313 million allocated to deliver it. So how Labor could have delivered on that program amongst all the others would be very, very difficult, Madam Speaker. So I know that the Gunbalanya clinic, or the health clinic, was money that was being revoted and been revoted and had been revoted. And I don't have the papers here in front of me, Madam Speaker, but I certainly know that it had been revoted into the outer years because Labor didn't provide the actual funding to deliver on many of those programs. We know that the $313 million that Labor had actually allocated in this budget only covered three probably of their large infrastructure projects that were already underway, Madam Speaker. Those being the housing program, the gallery that we probably don't particularly need next door, and of course the Mandorah new jetty across the harbour. So that's the total scope of the money that Labor had actually allocated in their infrastructure budget for year 25-26. So to be able to deliver on everything that Labor put up is going to require lots of careful consideration and possibly, again, lots of borrowing, because what Labor didn't do, they didn't budget for it, they didn't put it on scope, and they were trying to hide the fact that they were going to breach the debt ceiling by not funding projects ongoing. That's why there's only $313 million, Madam Speaker, put into the infrastructure budget for this year, when they needed at least $1.2 billion to deliver on their commitment, and we're talking about a $5 billion project. So I can't specifically speak to the Gunbalanya Clinic, Madam Speaker. I know that it is on program, but I don't remember it being scheduled to start this year, considering that the budget wasn't there to do it, and my understanding is that it had been rolled over into future years under Labor's own infrastructure program. And Madam Speaker, I request that all future questions be put on the notice paper.